Okay, it looks like we're ready to get started here. A little later than our planned schedule. But welcome everyone to the February 11th Recreation Commission meeting. I'll begin by acknowledging that the lands on which we gather are the unceded traditional territory of the Comox First Nation. Today we have a series of budgets to cover. We've got 4 on the agenda today and some overview from staff. So with that, I'll get to it and pass it over to staff.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon to the Commission members. Before I pass the microphone over to Lucy Wachark, our Chief Financial Officer, I wanted to provide a bit of context around the kickoff to the budget discussions at the Comox Valley Regional District. A week ago, we introduced the budgets, and this is a bit of a repeat for those of you who've been in the room today and last week as well. But for some of the new members, the recognition that we're in very volatile and uncertain economic times, given the economic relationship with the US and Canada and the uncertainty that is coming with all that, we at the CVRD are certainly recognizing that and taking a look at our suppliers lists, as well as our existing and future contract opportunities and service delivery, and seeking to understand the impact of that very uncertain situation and looking for opportunities and areas to minimize any kind of those impacts. Where we need to, we will come to the Recreation Commission to seek any further direction to formalize those changes if that is needed. And as well, in respect of the budget, which is why we're here today, a budget does need to be adopted by the end of March. Lucy will speak to a little bit of the timing on this, and we're also very, very mindful about the uncertainty that the current economic conditions are putting upon us for the budget process. That said, we do have a series of proposed budgets here today, and staff will be walking through those and entertaining those discussions and answering questions as we go. So, Lucy, the first part of this agenda is that public input portion, and then we'll move into the services themselves. So, Lucy.
Oh, practice.
Thank you through the chair to the directors. Good afternoon once again. We'll start off with the public engagement conducted in the same way, in the same format as we did the year before through our Engage site on the CVRD website. We have, there's actually 5 questions. I keep saying 4 because 2 of them are very similar, but for this particular board, the bulk of them are related to the services that are here. The most recent one we had was just an inquiry around operating expense and annual revenue for the aquatic center and the sports center pool, just broken down. So we haven't responded to that yet. So we'll get some info out there to have that that citizen just have some easy directions and access to information around that. So, and one of the first questions that came was about pickleball courts. So that's my update on public engagement. And if you'd like to move forward, just to say a few words before we get into our actual service budgets for the benefit of directors that aren't currently on our CVRD board.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you. The roadmap is up on the board here that hopefully will just help out, just to ground us a little bit, to let you know where we are at. We did roll out this budget on January 28th to the CVRD board. We posted our budget package out on the website, and this included your information that was available to directors to support these meetings and the discussions of the budget, and that included your high-level PowerPoint, which is the basis of what our presentations are follow along on as we present the individual service budgets. So you have the PowerPoint out there, detailed budgets and supplementary information, where there was some additional data that we wanted to provide to you in conjunction with the rest of the budget information. As we got into this 2025 cycle, we continued with our dedicated meetings. The first one started February 3rd with the CVRD board, where they received overviews of all of our core services so that they can have a holistic view of what's happening with the budget. And then we've proceeded along to our BCOB committee and meeting 1 of 2 for EASC. That brings us to February 11th, and all of the committee and commission meetings are set for February 11, and this is the areas where the CVRD board has delegated authority for budgets to those committees and commissions. For the Recreation Commission, there are 4 services that we will be addressing today. Have a brief overview by the manager, answer any questions. We will ask you for a resolution before we move on to the next service. And if there is more time that's needed, we try to provide you any additional information you're asking for as quickly as possible. And if you need more time, February 25th is designated for that, so that we can have things continue to roll along and included in the recommended budget for March 11th. I did just want to mention for this group, as part of our openings at the CVRD meeting when we delivered the proposed, there is one service here that is involved in an AAP process. So just a reminder that the turf field is in that process. The results of that close February 18th, I think, if I have that date right, and the results will come forward to the February 25th meeting of the CVRD board. Your budgets are prepared on the assumption that everything will continue along and the AAP proceeds. But if things change, then we'll deal with that after as well. Okay. And it was about it from a tariff perspective. We are already digging into turf fields, if that's something that's a wondering, and looking at where these materials come from and beginning to talk about potentially what implications there may be. So, okay. Thank you. So if there's no other further questions, we can move on to the overview.
Thanks for that, Lucy. I don't see any lights on, so I'll pass it back over to staff for the financial plan overview. Well, I guess that's what we just did. Okay, moving on to Recreation Core Service. I'll pass it over to staff. I don't think there's a motion for receipt there.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, Doug DeMarzel, General Manager of Community Services, will be speaking to the recreation as a core service at the CVRD. And then following his presentation, we'll be able to get into the individual service presentations. So Doug, over to you.
Thank you. And through the chair, I'm here to present on the Recreation Core Service, which really looks at the focus of the Aquatic Center, Sports Center, Curling Center, and of course our exhibition grounds. We also have the track and field services in here, which include the artificial turf and the 400-meter track. Of significant note is the commission undertook its own strategic planning session in 2023 and refined that in 2024. That really helps guide the future programming that we have in front of us, and you'll see in the presentations today. Some of our key service outcomes are listed here, but in short, we're really busting at the seams in a lot of areas, which is both a good and bad news story. Good news, our facilities are well used, programs are heavily subscribed to, and our partners are having a lot of registration success. And the bad news is perhaps we have not kept up with the growth, the change in activity patterns, and the standards seen in similar sized communities. However, overall, we really continue to strive to meet these key service outcomes, and the strategic plan components you've put together will help to better serve our citizens in all these areas. And we'll go through a little more detail through the presentations today to speak to the volunteer engagement, some of the partnerships, and the greenhouse gas objectives here. You've had a number of key initiatives, and again, I won't steal too much from the next presentations, but they really focus on your climate aspects, your playing fields, and implementing your plan. I will pause here for a moment and speak to the corporate energy and emissions plan. Your decarbonization strategy and roadmap for the sports center and aquatic centers is underway. As a reminder, the results show that replacing existing building systems for like components would cost about $6 million up through into 2050, not including escalation. The cost to replace these same components to meet SEEP targets and reduce GHG emissions would be an additional $7 million, bringing the total to $14 million. Of that, assuming everything stays the same, your utility and internal costs of carbon, those being the two big equivalency factors, you would recognize a total savings of $9 million. So it comes with a great cost savings in the long run by reducing our internal carbon costs and obviously the benefit of reducing your CO2 significantly. This is a big challenge for our staff as they're old facilities, and we don't have all the exact costs, and this is based on our preliminary thoughts, and not our thoughts, preliminary studies done in the last couple of years. We continue to have similar trends and challenges, as you may have seen in other budget presentations. These include supply chain constraints, which, as you're probably aware, the tariffs will either add to or perhaps improve depending where those products are coming from. You're having an increasing cost of capital projects. This continues to be a theme over the last 5 years. Every year, I hope I wouldn't have to say this again. Things would balance off, but it continues to be an escalation at abnormal rates that we've seen basically since COVID. And some of those opportunities I spoke to, obviously at the forefront is your carbon reduction strategies in your REC strategic plan. I think here with the exhibition grounds in particular, we've seen increased use of the exhibition grounds from a smaller perspective of programming and other things. However, we have lost some large events over this last year. Of note would be the Island Music Fest. We're still working on that master plan approval through the ALC. And we met with directors and others a few months ago, and we hope to eventually have that concluded. It's been with the ALC for 2 years now, so can only work at that pace. But I think it's important that this exhibition grounds remains available for agricultural opportunities, remains in the ALR, and really looks to promote that agricultural component of our residents in terms of long-term food security, education, and other types of uses that maybe we can't foresee today. Here we have some of our expenses. Overall, you do see in this service, there are some debt charges remaining. Personnel costs are obviously the main driver as we deliver a lot of programs. And we also see a few transfers to reserves as we've spoken. Our reserve component, as you'll see in future presentations, is not the strongest here, considering the size of our buildings and our assets. And it's important that we continue to look to building those reserves as we strengthen the rejuvenation of some of our buildings and potentially add new assets. We have a sales of service component here that makes up about 15% of our revenue. So we are moving forward. We're a small geographic community, and we're coming together to focus on these key service areas of community vitality and health embraced by recreation. It will prove challenging in the face of so many competing interests with undertones of division felt throughout our society. It's important we focus on recreation and serving our community. Recreation in your hometown, along with parks, often becomes more important when times get tough, as we saw recently in COVID, and arguably past recessions, and as far back as the Great Depression. Moving forward, perhaps our population does not have an abundance of surplus income that they have previously seen in the past. Low-cost recreation opportunities and venturing out into your own backyard do become more feasible. So this lines with some of your core strategic drivers of serving your community through being fiscally responsible and building those community partnerships. And as may come to fruition, accessibility, diversity, equity, and inclusion continue to be a part of these recreation services delivered to our community with our low-income programs such as LEAP. I'll leave you there with any questions you may have for me.
Thanks, Doug. Does the board have any questions on the core service overview? Seeing none, we'll move on to the various service financial plans, starting with Service 600 recreation grants. Are we not doing receipt motions today? I guess not. Okay, perfect. I'll hand it back over to staff.
Great, thanks. And Doug DeMarzo will be introducing Function 600, the Recreation Grant Service.
Thank you. Through the chair, this is largely a service that looks at that partnership growth and supporting partners around the region, as well as the Courtney Outdoor Memorial Pool. So I mentioned some of our municipal partners. We also support Cumberland and Comox programming and the skate park. There's recent support of the construction of the cricket pitch at Vanier in 2024, which brought a new sport opportunity to our community, which has been long played, one of the most popular games in the world, in fact. Some people sometimes ask, what do you get out of your UROC contract? Well, they maintain kilometers and kilometers of trails on largely a volunteer basis. So some of the support you've given them in the past has helped them develop strategic plans, help them with large capital projects. But really, they run, it's like, in some ways, its own park system out there run by a nonprofit volunteer organization. And you also received some background documentation as part of the financial planning briefing. And this looks at how some of your 12 grants have been distributed. I would say there's a continued need to support recreation community groups that really offer different services than what we see in our region, and offer it using volunteers and others to really be involved in their passions to help bring these programs or services to our community. One of our hopes is to expand to a broader range of groups through the recreation grant portal, which I'll talk a little bit about in a future slide. Very few HR impacts here, stays much the same. Your expenses, excuse me, go up and have continued to increase actually with this service. Some of it's because of your commitments to the field house, which is still kind of a carry forward item here, and continuing to support grants to other operations and clubs. Of significance here is the Courtney Outdoor Memorial Pool, which has seen significant increases over the years to both their operations and capital development, and in particular this year, request for $350,000 for equipment and repairs. And moving forward, there's been other presentations that you saw in November, which hasn't been included in the 2026 budget of an additional increase of over $1 million, which we'll have to deal with and discuss at a future time this year when we get more information. Here's a recap of that. Here's your grants to your other organizations. We'll just take note of that unallocated amount. Typically, we set aside an unallocated amount for other organizations to come forward throughout the year for either major events or additional assistance, or just new organizations that weren't necessarily aware of this opportunity. I think moving forward, well, I don't think, the board has endorsed a new grant process coming in 2026. So at the next, this will be the last budget, you'll see that list that has allocated amounts previously determined. In the next budget process for under 30,000, the grants will have to apply annually, and we'll work through those grant application process and be each considered. For those over 30,000, we'll be moving towards user agreements, and that includes with municipalities down the long run. We hope to have those in place in 2025, but it could be 2026 before we have the municipalities in, as we are working on other grant rejuvenation projects here at the CVRD. So next year's presentation will be quite different and more a process of allocation as opposed to what you see here. Of course, we always want you to have your input to the organizations and the amounts requested on that briefing note if you're not agreeable with them at this stage. Funding sources, projections. Talked a bit about this. Here you see a future expenditure reserve. Stays much the same with some contributions. Increase about $50,000 over the next 4 years. I think I've summarized most of your key strategic drivers throughout the presentation. With that, I'll leave you with any questions you may have.
Thanks for the presentation and the report. Just looking around the room to see if the directors have any questions on particular budget. Seeing none, I'll go first. Oh, Director Jolicoeur.
Well, you can go, Chair, but you skipped through the slide on capital plan really quickly, and I was curious about two of the bullet points. The field house for soccer pending, and then mountain bike trail improvements. Are those the items that our partners out in the community had committed to through some of the larger grants? That would be slide 14.
Yeah, the field house is a continuing carry forward through the soccer clubhouse. It's difficult to say when they're gonna actually build it. I think I've repeated this message for a few years now. We've had recent conversations with them and still our clarity is not 100% clear to answer that question. With regards to the capital improvements for the mountain bikes, that would be through UROC and their discretion with what they do with their dollars. There has been some discussion around parking and climbing trails in line with their strategic plan, but it hasn't been confirmed at this stage.
Okay, so just as a follow-up, so those are the capital plan, those two items would be capital projects that the partners have committed to through funding through the grant?
Yeah, would they be capital projects that the one in particular is solely a capital projects that the rec commission for the field house has committed to. The other capital projects are the mountain bike one is an example of what an organization might use for a capital project.
Okay.
As part of their process.
Thanks for that. And just picking up on the question of that field house request that we've been holding on to for a few budget cycles now. Is the intent just to wait until there is a clear direction, either that they've decided not to proceed with the project or that it's going ahead and that we'll carry it forward indefinitely? Or is there a point at which we want to revisit that request? It doesn't really seem like it fits in with our kind of normal process. So I'm just wondering if we've given thought to, how long we can keep that as an outstanding item.
Yeah, we've given it some thought, but I'd say given that it was committed funds from a few years back and it's just simply a carry forward. Each year the club indicates a renewed interest in moving it forward, and I think they're back. Jennifer's just informed me to perhaps a permitting process to the city of Courtenay, so it'll be some time till we get a clear answer. We also have some of your strategic plan pieces coming forward, such as the business case for Arena 3. So there's been some conversations to maybe look at alternative locations for that, and we have the field coming in. So there's a number of factors there that have aligned to it not being completed. Obviously, their original intentions prior to COVID when we first approved this was a lot smaller building cost for a lot larger building. So since COVID's completed, as you've heard through a theme through most of these presentations, is the costs have gone up quite quickly through inflation. So I think at one point they were behind their objectives from a financial standpoint. Now they may have caught up. Now they're behind from a permitting standpoint. So it's one of those challenges that nonprofits often face as they rely on their volunteers who are usually passionate in the sport as opposed to maybe passionate in some of those capital projects.
Yeah, I think that request predates my time on the commission, so it's been a couple of years. I'm not exactly sure when, but I don't see a huge downside to holding on to it until the issue is resolved. So the other question I had, just to clarify, the city of Courtenay came to the commission, I think it was back in November, requesting an increase to the adaptive program or the adaptive needs program. And it is highlighted that the city receives funding, but I wasn't clear if the increased amount was included in the proposed budget, and I just didn't see it broken out.
Yeah, the increased amount for what the city requested is included in the proposed budget.
Great, thanks. I don't see any other lights on. Does someone move by Hillian second? Okay, any questions or comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And that's carried unanimously. Okay, moving right along. We're on service 601, the Comox Valley Track and Fields. And I'll pass that back to staff.
Thank you, Chair. Trish Morgan, our Assistant Senior Manager of Recreation Services, will be introducing this budget, the Comox Valley Track and Fields Service 601. Trish, over to you.
There we go. So 601 track and field services. This includes the sub-functions of the sports track and the playing field. And the purpose is to provide funding for the maintenance and capital costs of the 400-meter sports track and the playing fields in the city of Courtenay, town of Comox, electoral areas B and C, and a defined portion of area A contribute to that. The only proposed change for 2025 includes the potential addition of a new artificial turf field pending the alternative approval process, if that passes, and the 10-year borrowing is moved forward. So strategic priorities and initiatives, building on the strategic planning that was undertaken in 2023, the key initiatives for this service include construction of a new artificial turf field at Vanier, the development of a regional field allocation policy and centralized booking system, and an amenity improvement plan. As the commission is aware, the construction of the field is subject to the AAP, and that's currently underway and closes on February 18th. If it's approved, construction will start in the spring and wrap up in September of 2025, pending weather as well. With funding from the Rec Commission, the City of Courtenay has taken the lead coordinating role in the development of a regional field allocation policy and investigation into a centralized booking system for the region. That project just kicked off last week with the consulting firm, city staff, and project partners being the CVRD, Comox, Cumberland, and School District. The project will also engage sport user groups and is expected to wrap up in Q1 of 2026. Once that project is complete, then work will begin on an amenity improvement plan, and that will be developed collaboratively with our partners. Some accomplishments for 2024, the substantial completion of the design for the artificial turf field, along with a 10-year borrowing strategy and preparation for the alternative approval process. Trends, challenges, and opportunities are very much like many others have talked about in terms of increasing demand for recreation facilities, demand for amenities, which Doug talked about, but also challenges in rising construction costs, the potential for tariffs, which may impact projects as we go forward. We are keeping a close eye on those impacts. At this time, for the artificial turf field, we're being told by our consultants that companies are holding their prices, but we don't know how long that will be for. We are on track right now to issue the request for or issue our tender packages by the end of February should the AAP pass. And that will hopefully lock in the pricing for the project. And finally, some opportunities looking forward into the future, again, is working collaboratively with our partners to look at how we can invest into field amenities around the Comox Valley, such as lighting and washrooms. Human resources remains unchanged at 0.02. On the expense side, our operating expenses are down from 2024. Mainly as a result of substantially completing the design work for the artificial turf field. And there are a few increases there with increases to utilities, water and hydro, and increases to support services as the different services within the CVRD support recreation and implementing the recreation strategic plan. Overall, our revenue has decreased slightly to align with the expenses and the tax requisition however, has been maintained at $986,000, and about $17,000 has been carried forward from surplus in order to maintain that level. On the funding sources side, the only thing I'll just note here is that the tax rate, the anticipated tax rate is down from 0.036 cents per thousand to 0.0351 cents per thousand. And our maximum tax rate in the service is 0.04 cents per thousand. Moving into 2026, we expect a reduction in expenses from just over $1 million to approximately 740. Significant cost will be the repayment of debt at approximately $400,000 a year should the AAP for the turf pass. And going into asset management. So moving into our asset management planning and looking a few more years down the future, the current artificial turf field is expected to be replaced in 2029. Right now, we're estimating a cost of $1 million. However, when we go out to tender on the proposed new field, this will give us a baseline of the potential future costs, to which we'll have to add inflation and possibly tariffs. Keeping in mind the replacement will include the shock pad and the turf itself, and the crumb rubber can be collected and used again. So it's not a replacement of the entire facility, it is just the turf itself and the pad underneath. The 400-meter track is due for replacement in 2020 or 2033. However, in 2026, we plan to do some investigating to see if there might be some lower cost alternatives to a full replacement that could also extend the life and increase its usability. Our capital plan for 2025 to 2029 includes the artificial turf field, should that move forward past the AAP. If it doesn't, then as Lucy said, there will be a revision to the plan. The plan also includes $80,000 to repair the long jump, triple jump runway and pit at the track. This has not been functional in a functional working condition for at least 10 years. As a result, the schools, the track club, Special Olympics, they're limited in the events that they can train and compete in. And it also limits the events that they can host, such as BC Summer Games, provincials, even maybe zones in some cases. So Cougars has committed $10,000 to the refurbishment, and we're waiting to hear if the school district can contribute in-kind services to reduce the cost or provide their portion of the funding. As such, the commission may want to consider its options. At this point, we've included it in the budget. We could move it forward, and if we get that contribution from the school district, then we move forward with the project. Alternatively, the commission could provide direction to defer this to a future budget year, and in the meantime, we continue to have more dialogue with the school district about their contribution. The reserves, these are the projected balances at the end of 2024. And our future expenditure reserve of major note here again is if the artificial turf field moves forward, then there will be a transfer out of about $1.4 million to contribute to that capital project. And here are proposed balances for the track. I'll skip over this quickly because I think Doug pretty much covered most of it. And the staff recommendation is that the proposed budget for the service be approved. Are there any questions?
Thanks for the presentation. I see Director Jolicoeur has his mic on. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Question for clarification in the, I know that we're talking about subfunction 601, and I appreciate that you've highlighted for support services, there's an increase. It's looking like about $10,000. And then in 645, I think every subfunction saw an increase to support support services except for 645 where there's a decrease. And so is that just a reallocation from 645 to the other subfunctions that is more representative of that staff time that staff just spoke about?
I think I'll ask if Kelly Broughton's able to cover off. The CVRD has a support services policy, and I think Kelly can probably provide some background on that policy.
Thanks for the question through the chair. So as James said, we have a support services policy that we follow. That includes several different allocation bases that we use to allocate the general admin costs throughout all of the services in the CVRD. They change. This particular service and some of the other ones have changed because of one of those allocation bases is based on budgets, on the current year operating budget, as well as the previous year 5-year rolling capital budget. There's also allocations used for HR, for IT support, rent within the building to cover the building costs. There's one more, I can't think of it right now.
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's helpful. So presumably if the AP moves forward and we're good to go, there's going to be more staff support required.
Yeah, and that allocation can change from year to year. It's mostly driven through the budgets though that are changing it.
I do have another
Thanks.
question, but I can get back in line. Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks for the question, and over to Director Kerr.
Thanks. A couple slides back, there was the mention of the school district covering half of the ongoing maintenance costs. And it was listing the turf field that exists and also the track. Is that for both of those facilities, the track and the original turf field, or just one? And would that also apply to the new turf field should it go ahead? Thanks.
Through the chair to Director Kerr. So with the new artificial turf field, that is a cost that the CVRD bears at when it comes to building the capital. When it comes to the renewal, we have agreements in place for to be a shared cost 50-50. So we're looking with the long jump, triple jump, we're looking to see what that might, we're still investigating to figure out how that might work, because school district may be able to take on a portion of that work. So, but we're still investigating that, so.
Thanks for the question, and back to Director Jolicoeur.
Yeah, well, I had another question, but just to go off of Director Kerr's comments on the school district's portion of asset, either acquiring assets or maintaining the assets. And I think staff had in the presentation suggested an option for the commission to consider the long jump, triple jump repair. And I appreciate that we haven't heard back from the school district yet, but given that I imagine that facility will be utilized by the school district a fair bit. I appreciate that there's clubs that will also utilize it and events. But I would be open to hearing back from the school district prior to us approving this through our requisition. Because I think just for clarity, we've only secured 1,000 from 10,000 from a club. So we're looking at 70,000 through requisition. So I would be interested in considering that. So that's, I guess, a comment. I don't know if staff have any idea when we plan to hear back from the school district on our requests.
Through the chair to Director Jolicoeur, we met with them in mid-January, and they're still going through some of the different items that we discussed with them. So it might still be a while, but I think Kelly has a comment about the funding for this.
Thanks for the question through the chair. I just wanted to clarify that funding would not be coming directly through the requisition. It comes from the reserve.
Okay, great. Thanks.
You can go to your next question.
Thank you. Yeah, my next question, I appreciate that staff opened up and reiterated it throughout the presentations around the environment that we're living in. And given that we are considering a large capital expenditure in this financial plan, if the AP looks fruitful for us to proceed, do we have any in the preliminary tendering process that staff have done. And I know at one point in our strategic planning, there was a lot of conversation around the materials used in artificial turfs, contractors, and I seem to forget a little bit of those details, but I'm just curious if we have high hopes that we will be able to find a Canadian contractor and Canadian goods to be able to provide for the artificial turf.
Through the chair to the director. So we connected with our consultant last week about the potential that tariffs could have on this project. And unfortunately, there are not a lot of suppliers in Canada, or it mainly comes through the US for the turf, for the shock pads, that sort of thing. So there are some options, possibly from China or from Europe, but there are increased costs, of course, associated with that, with the product and also with the shipping. So we are keeping a close eye on that. We don't know about local contractors just yet. We're not there yet, but we are still exploring different ways to keep the costs down. And we are looking at a few different grant opportunities for perhaps maybe some of the amenities, or working with user groups to see if we can secure that. When we do go out to tender, we will, in terms of the infill, we will be asking for optional costs for recycled crumb rubber versus new crumb rubber versus organic material, coated sand, just so we can see what those options are and those costs and what the impacts might be.
Thanks for that. I just had a question around the water costs. I noticed from our expenses that they're about 3 times what we spend on hydro. Is that all related to the grass field at Highland? Is that the only water costs?
It's Vanier and Highland.
So is that just the grass that's inside the track then, is that right?
No, it's the 2 soccer grass fields at Vanier.
Oh, those are part of it, okay.
Yeah, they're sprinklered.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that. It seemed like a lot for one area, but that makes more sense, so thanks for the clarification. And I don't see any other lights on, so we can move on to the recommendation if someone wants to move it. Moved by Jollycur, seconded by Morin. Any questions or comments on the recommendation? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? And that's carried unanimously. Moving right along to service 645, the Comox Valley Recreation Complexes, and I'll pass that back to staff.
Thank you, Chair. And Jennifer Zvinden, our Senior Manager of Recreation Services, will be introducing the Rec Complexes service budget. Jen.
Thank you. Through the chair, so staff are here to review the 645 Comox Valley Rec Complex Services budget. Thank you to our GM who gave us a great opening. So we're just going to jump right into our slides. So we have no changes here to our service here. Where we want to jump into is our accomplishments for the 2024. So staff are implementing the Comox Valley Regional District Rec Strategic Plan, and we're currently working on the ICE plan, which includes the feasibility study and the business case for increasing seating. So we've got to jump on it. We've done some capital improvements and work, and under fiscal responsibility and climate action, we completed $1.5 million in capital improvements in 2024. We have a 20-year capital plan that we've put together in 2024 for moving forwards, and there's a $13 million in capital improvements over those 20 years. And what we want to keep in mind is the cost escalation the further out we get out of that 20-year plan. Community partnerships and accessibility. We've completed several partnerships and accessibility services through our recreation programs and services. And as Doug said, attendance post-COVID increases. In 2023, we got back to a 93.17% usage. And in 2024, we bumped up to 95%. So we're almost back to where we were pre-COVID. We are so close. And the other piece is the customer service engagement and check-ins. We had 2 open houses in November for our patrons to stop in and see the work the staff are doing. And it helps them understand the decisions we come to and why, and it gives updates on the ongoings of recreation. And staff did find we received a lot less emails and letters from the community when we started these open houses, because people could come and talk with us. Moving forward to the 2025 work plan items, there's a lot of items here. They are all linked to safety, asset management, and SEEP work, and all 3 of those are critical to keep those facilities running. Under trends and challenges, of course, we continue to have challenges with the increasing cost of capital projects, and funding remains to be the primary barrier for decarbonization. Facilities reaching asset renewal milestones of 26 years and 51 years of age. So what stays on our mind that whole time is the potential of any life safety equipment failures. It's always on our minds. You can't predict those. Those just happen when they happen. And the other challenge we have is staffing recruitment continues to be a challenge and an issue in the lifeguard area. Finding people that want to come and work is getting tougher and tougher. Opportunities, carbon reduction strategies may bring opportunities for grants to fund capital replacement projects while meeting CVRD's energy and emissions goals. And the REC strategic plan is underway to help meet the needs of the current population and to help support healthy and vibrant lifestyle choices. And that comes around full circle given the age of our facilities. Our strategic priorities are all linked to master plan work and department work plans and strategic drivers. So currently we're at Arena 3 feasibility studies and business case to understand the arena options and operating costs, and of course the decarbonization strategy and roadmap. Under the human resources, we have 59.88 FTEs. Included in this figure is for 2025 is the ask for an additional 1.0 FTE. And this relates to a new operations supervisor position. And this position will support effective day-to-day operations at both the sports and aquatic centers, maintenance and cleanliness of those facilities, supervision, support, mentoring and training of operations staff, and in turn, that should help reduce liability exposure, work safe liabilities, and also improve that the work culture. Under our expenses, some of the key items that we do have is, again, linked to safety. So cameras, surveillance cameras. We have, 2/3 of the facility full of cameras, and we got a few more spaces that we need to go on the outsides and back of the buildings. First aid supplies and a safety plan, and of course, public relations when you're doing the type of events that we're doing and the projects that we're managing. Under the safety plan, some of the key things that we've really learned is that as there's more stress put on the community for whatever challenges people in the community have, the more we tend to have a more heightened environment in our facilities. And so we want to start putting some more in-depth safety plans in place. As an example, we have a high school right beside us. If there's any kind of situation over the high school where we potentially have to do a lockdown at the sports center or over at from the North Island College next door, we need to have our safety plans really fleshed out and in place to provide that safety for the staff and for our patrons that are in the facilities at those times. Under revenues, right now, we just want to say there's no reliance on surplus at the proposed. Therefore, the taxation increase is what's proposed here on this in this presentation. Under our funding sources, there is a slight change from 2024 to 2025 with an increase of 552,000, and again, a modest increase in 2028 of 40,000. And these increases are to ensure we can deliver our programs and services and maintain those healthy and safe buildings through our maintenance and our project work. Our funding services for our sales and services revenue, a slight decrease in some programming due to shifting staff levels onto the pool decks and into the water, where the interest and demand tends to be within our community, which is the big one for us is more swimming lessons, more and more and more. And where we see a decrease is in the area that we call the dry land, where we would, in the past, would have offered some kind of strength training in our wellness center and perhaps the odd yoga class here and there. The area that we have to be really cognizant on is that we are not competing with our neighboring municipalities with a dry land type of programming. So I think our programming for anything like a fitness class, dry land, couldn't really never get off the ground because we have some neighboring municipalities that really provide some good solid programming, which is their specialty, where we are water and ice. Under our operating, incremental increases, again, to support the work and the staffing levels needed to keep our facilities running in respects to health and safety and risk management. So you'll hear a recurring theme that for our facilities is about risk management and health and safety, staff safety and patron safety. Heading into our capital planning topics, the first one we have is our asset management. Project planning is underway to start to implement CityWorks asset management framework in 2025 and an inventory and condition assessment for the curling center. The decarbonization strategy and roadmap will provide significant insight into the asset management plan for recreation services, and the implementation is ongoing. Lots of work there. Our 2025 to 2029 capital plan. So again, that's all wrapped in again to asset management and seep work, heat reclaim focused work, and ice surface replacement, which will be ice surface replacement for 2027, and our EV vehicles. And all those things equal risk management and health and safety. We've also layered in from 2027 through to 2030 the cost for the Arena 3, which is currently the idea of a community rink. So 2027 is design and site prep, continue through 2028 and 2029. And I believe in 2030, and I'm going to look at finance for this, we have approximately 14 million left to finish the project. And that's all dependent on the business case which is up for consideration. And I'll just carry on, and maybe if there's any questions, finance can help pop in that with me after. And then we have here 2030 to 2034. Again, some vital things like parking lot pavement replacement, fitness equipment, and pool basin work. And again, EV vehicles. And for those that are familiar with our facilities, the aquatic center has an epoxy basin. The sports center has a tile basin. The tile basin, you can see how old that sports center pool is. That tile basin has hung in here for well over 50 years now, 51 years. And the pool basin at the aquatic center, both pool basins are an epoxy. And you'll find that we need to treat that and make that healthy every couple of years, where if we can look to shifting to tiling those two pool basins, we'll have longevity where we're not going to have to put costs in there in 5 and 10 years because of what the tiles can give in comparison to epoxy. Tiles are affected a lot less with chemicals than epoxy is. Recreation strategy. So again, where we're at the Arena 3 feasibility study, which was, looks like we have completed that in 2024, Trish, yeah. And the Arena 3 business case is coming forth in 2025. And in aquatics, the expansion feasibility study is aimed for 2026 or later, depending on how we move through the next little while in our studies. And then here we have our projected balances for our future expenditure reserves and our capital works and machinery reserves. Our future expenditure reserves, the projected balances over the next 5 years. Our capital works and machinery works reserves, again, what that's going to look like over the next 5 years. And our debt. To ensure that we can complete and take care of our assets and our seat work, we need to do an additional debt funding built into the capital plan. Otherwise, again, the health and safety and the risk management of our facilities doesn't get taken care of. Under the summary, Doug, you covered that very well. Thank you. And so our last slide, second to last slide, is options and recommendations for the proposed 2025 to 2029 financial plan for Service 645 Comox Valley Complex Services be approved. And on that note, staff are available for questions.
Thanks for the report and presentation. I see there's a few lights on. Did you?
Can I jump in really quickly? I just want to recognize that Jennifer Zimenden just passed her 40th anniversary with the CVRD.
Oh, wow.
And Jennifer, I think, is the recreation complexes and the rec facilities. This is where you've been for so long. We extend deep appreciation for your commitment to the service and to the community and to the people of Comox Valley. So I want to recognize that.
Thank you. It's been a really true pleasure. Oh, thank you. And I just want to say I started when I was 8. So thank you.
With that, I'll pass it over to Director Morin.
Great, thank you, Chair. Wow, what a way to kick off. I was curious about the violence prevention plan and the work plan. Wondering if you can say a little bit more about that. I know that our municipal staff are encountering, with more people and more demand on our services and more public interaction. There's, often more need for that. I know throughout this presentation, safety's been a theme, obviously safety of the facilities themselves, but also I'm assuming the safety in terms of people interaction. With that question, in terms of additional training or any other HR, are you noticing more funds needed to kind of help support staff in that way? Thanks.
Through the chair, things are certainly getting a lot more heightened as people come through the doors. And what we're really finding is that maybe staff haven't had all the tools that they need in their toolbox to be able to help serve our patrons when a simple example, their shoes have been taken out of the lockers, or there's an issue, they have a car battery issue out in the parking lot, or just anything that small to the more larger things. We feel we haven't maybe been able to equip our staff as best as they should be. So in part, that safety plan is to provide that training and tools to be able to deal with the customers and each other when there's a stressful situation, and how to help, de-escalate that. So that's the first piece of it. And then having those step-by-step processes in place, like flip charts and things, quick references for them to be able to go to be able to go, okay, right, this is what I need to do in this circumstance or in this instance, and this is how I can help this customer, or this is how I can help my coworker. So those things have really kind of come to light more and more in the last year or two, certainly. And we are finding that as we start putting in more and more training, that there will come a point where there's going to be a request for more funding to be able to make sure that we can really provide meaningful and solid training that you can take away and it sticks with you, and so in the future, yes. So currently we have some requests for some funding in there for the safety plan to get some actual plans, some improved plans put in place for staff, and then it will cover the training currently that we're going to need for those plans. And that includes things with just how to deal with the general day-to-day animosity that you can be faced with, and then those extenuating circumstances that can happen. Like, we have the hospital right across the road from us, and we do get patients that come and visit us sometimes from the hospital that maybe shouldn't have left the hospital yet. And they found it at the side door And that can be a little bit, you know, frightening for the staff. So how do we deal with that, you know?
Mhm.
So yes, this is going to be an ongoing thing, I think, over the coming years, certainly.
Could I have a quick follow-up, Chair? Yeah, I think we're seeing more of this for sure. And I do go to the rec facilities a fair amount with my grandson, and it seems like, and this is nothing on staff, but there just always seems to be some little incident or bigger incident that staff are dealing with, like evacuations for different reasons and things like that. So, and you mentioned being next to the hospital. We have some new housing going in at the college. We have the high school next to the rink. So there's a lot of public interaction. And I guess I'm just wondering, I mean, there's a lot of onus being put on our staff, but maybe some public messaging around public conduct would be nice. I mean, I know some of the organized sports are doing a lot of public, PR around conduct in rinks, as an example, and adults behaving. I mean, we're not talking necessarily about, folks who have some mental health issues and things like that. That's a different scenario. There's a lot of people with mental capacity who are behaving badly. So I think, I think that's something for us to consider, as some public messaging around just conduct in our facilities. Because I don't think that the onus should be just on our staff to get trained. So I just wanted to put that out there in terms of just kudos to staff, because I have witnessed staff being having to deal with this kind of behavior, and it's frankly not okay. Thanks.
Thanks for those questions and comments. I don't know, did you want a response to that, or was it more an open question?
I guess just.
Sorry. Tier 7.
I guess just, is it possible to do some kind of public messaging around that, maybe even around registration time or something like that? It doesn't have to be necessarily all the time, but just to remind people about that. Thanks.
Looking at Jen to see who wants to thank you, Director Moore. And I think it's really some valuable insight into the complexity that is being faced by our recreation staff in particular in this instance, but in a much more general sense as well. We will look for those opportunities to undertake more of that public messaging. I can think of our rec guide, for example. I know there's also other efforts in the rec complexes already to promote good, healthy conduct, and I think we can continue with that. And it's nice to have that support from the commission in that regard too. So.
Thanks. And Director Hardy.
Yeah, thanks. Congratulations again, Jen, with 40 years service with the CVRD. It's amazing. You're only 35 years old. So I struggle with the math there. But anyways, just add a little bit to the comment or the concern with regards to security at our facilities. And maybe it's something that we need to start looking at with regards to budgeting for security. Having a special set of security folks there that can kind of maybe deal with some of the folks that staff are dealing with. I just throw it out there, and obviously it's an increase in cost with regards to the operations, but it's probably a safety more than anything cost with regards to the operations. I got a question. I don't know if I ask it to Jen or if I ask it to Lucy, and it's in regards to costs for water. And going through the expenses, and I see under 647 for aquatics, there's no water costs. Under 649, there's no water costs for the arena, but I see under 648-430, there's water costs of about 70,000 under operation. So I'm just kind of wondering, is the water for the arena, the water for the swimming pool facilities falling under the operations side of the expenses? And I see it's maintained at $70,000 over the next 5 years. And the reason I ask, and I bring this forward because I know we're going to talk about the exhibition grounds, and I'd like to jump ahead of things. But I see in the exhibition grounds in 24 we had $7,500 for cost of water, and in 25, there's a jump to 25,000. So that's why I asked these questions with regards to what's going on with regards to the CVRD complexes and the maintained water cost is 70,000, but there seems to be a significant jump at the exhibition ground. So just flag that, and maybe you don't have the answer today, and maybe next time we chat, we do.
Go ahead.
Through the chair, maybe I'll do the security piece first. So we do have security coming to the aquatic center and the sports center on certain days and certain nights. And we recently just implemented security over lunch hour over at the sports center. So we'll continue to look at that and continue to, there'll be areas we might have to increase it or decrease it. So that's definitely on our staff's radar, and we do have it in place on those sort of critical times already, but it's looking like we need to probably increase it other areas. And the second piece for the water, so for the rec complexes, all the water comes out of the operations budget, which is 648. So for the pool and for the ice arena, that all comes out of that line item that you saw in 648. And then we'll talk about the exhibition grounds when we get to 660.
There's no increase, right? It's a level.
Yeah, it's a level, yeah.
Thanks for that question. And over to Director Jolicoeur.
Thanks, Chair. I guess I have two questions for clarification. One was I think on a few of the slides, it talks to an increase in desire for programming. And staff did speak to one of the decreases, which is under arena and wellness programs. This is slide 11. Under funding sources, it's about $25,000. And staff also spoke to, I think, the reallocation of the staff that were supporting those types of programming. So I guess I'm curious for some context, because I think this might be the first time the commission has heard that there is one area, at least, a program area where there's a decrease of an interest from the public in participation. And then I guess the flip side to that, which is that it sounds like we're reallocating those staff to swimming. But I'm not seeing in the proposed budget an increase in the revenue for swimming in any of the lines, whether it be the classes or the open programming. So just wondering, are we, with that reallocation of staff, are we offering more swimming? And if we are, how are we calculating whether or not that's going to be an increase in revenue or not?
Through the chair, the amount of staff that we reallocate for the arena wellness program is 2 people, 2 staff. And when we go over to the swimming lesson side of things, what it means is that you can have 2 instructors in one class to provide more safety, versus the pools are full. There's no more space to actually add more classes. And sadly, the desire for people to come to the sports center for swimming lessons is not as exciting as coming to the aquatic center. So that's a bit of a challenge that we have there. So what the difference is that the staff are reallocated, and if you have 2 staff for safety, sometimes you can add 1 or 2 more kids. That's not going to give a big effect to the revenue increase. It won't show as a big effect.
Yeah, thanks. And yeah, it sounds like we're creating more safer environments for the program participants, and you've been honing in on that in your presentation. So I appreciate that. I do have one more question, Chair, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
It was related to the slide, the FTE slide. I think it's important just to ask some questions about that, because there's an increase and there is no dollar amount on the slide, and I haven't been able to look at last year's budget comparatively to this year's, because I imagine that it's probably spread across a few of the areas in the budget. So what are we looking at? I think I heard you say it's a management position, and that is to take over supervision of how many staff?
So through the chair, it's a bargaining unit staff member, not management. There's a little bit of a difference there, and they're looking after the facility maintenance workers and the custodian area, and working on the capital projects and the maintenance programs of the 2 facilities. So there is a total of 14 and 10, 24 staff that that, that they support. And it's between 2 locations. So currently we have one supervisor of operations supervisor, and they have to try and bounce between 2 facilities. And because we're open 7 days a week, 6 a.m. until 9:30 at night, most days, for the pools, and until 1 o'clock in the morning in the arenas, having that second operations supervisor to help cover all those hours. So right now, staff will only see the supervisor for 10 hours for 4 days. And the rest of the time, there isn't an operations supervisor. So in order to provide that support, that mentoring, and that guidance to ensure all the work gets done, that's the rationale behind having to have the second operations supervisor. And we did have a second one in the past. And as we came into pre-COVID, things slowed down. We had COVID, we slowed down. We didn't necessarily need that second position, but now that we've ramped back up, it's certainly needed for the facilities.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Just wondering, to go back on my last question, I remembered I had some thinking around why we think there's a decrease in the wellness programming.
So our neighboring municipalities, they can provide quality strength training, fitness classes in the gyms, yoga, just all those dry aerobics, those kinds of things. Our specialty is ice and water. And we don't necessarily always have the space. So when we tell you, hey, come and have a strength training session, we try to get 4 to 6 people into our wellness center, and there might be 20 other people in there working out. It's not a financially viable thing to close the wellness center for 4 or 5 people. So it's not always, it's maybe not, we're just not set up properly for it. It's not our specialty. So we want to leave that specialty to the other municipalities, and we'll hone in on the water and the ice.
Thanks for those questions. I had a couple myself. My main one was around our reserve contributions for the service, particularly the capital works and machinery reserve, which I think is the main one that we have for, addressing basically any kind of major equipment failures, or as you mentioned, our facilities are not exactly new. And they're fairly complicated. These are huge assets. These are really some of the most expensive services that we have in our whole organization. And I expressed this last year when we looked at our reserve contributions, and I don't think my thinking around this has changed. It just seems like a very small amount of funds that we're setting aside to maintain our capital and or maintain our equipment and plan for maintenance and replacement. And so I'm wondering if, and looking at this, our reserves dipped down to $1 million at the end of 2027, which is lower than our reserves get in the track and field service, which are considerably more simple assets. So I'm just wondering if staff can help me understand what the rationale is for how we're funding reserves, and even that in our 5-year plan, they actually go, the contributions go down, as do the balances, and how that is going to connect with our asset management plan going forward.
Through the chair, I'm going to hand this over to finance.
Thanks. Sorry, I'll get you turned on. Thanks.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'll start, and Kelly may have more to add. Or this is a really important topic, so thanks for bringing it up and highlighting it again. It's one of our areas that we know we need to be spending some more time on, that we are worried about for exactly the reasons that you spoke to from an asset management perspective. So clearly for 2025, we've come forward with an ask of over 8% in bringing the requisitions up. In doing that and putting forward this 10-year plan, I guess I would say we are working with the reserves to make it work across the 10 years in a very, very thin way. We know that there is that we need additional reserves, dollars going in here, that these reserve balances should be much higher. But we're taking this one step at a time, I guess. We did a quite a big body of work in this last year, and that's the 20-year capital plan. And, you know, first step is understanding more so what does that future, what does our future capital plan look like? And then clearly coming back to try to determine how are we going to fund that. So we've done that piece of work. We know we need to we are going to build our asset management plans. And that will give us some updated information around replacement value, condition and risk and all of that, that we can refactor in to, we want to be able to use that, that data that's been, that's verifiable, accurate, in order to build a comprehensive plan of where we need to go with these reserves. So once we have that asset data, come back and consider what these reserve minimum and maximum balances should be. And we absolutely feel we'll have to come back and gradually be increasing the requisition for this service. Every time it comes up on the board, it's a $10 million service. It is an asset heavy service. We are behind in what we have here in our savings. And the best we can do is to be building increases to requisitions to be able to get these balances to where they need to be in order to mitigate any kind of risk. Because the last thing, we don't want our recreation services to be down in the community. That's the last thing that we want. And we want to be able to take care of these assets as we should. So those are my opening comments. We've got asset management going. We are looking at this full circle to tie out all of these very important best practice things to ensure that we have sustainable recreation service. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Yeah. You may or may not have noticed, unfortunately, when we have the debt slide up, we have debt associated with life cycling. That is not something that's going to go in policy, or not something we'd recommend go in the policy, but we had no choice. So I think it just speaks to the, you know, where we're at with this service. So we don't want to be there funding life cycling with debt. But it is at the moment, I'm not sure it's short-term. It's short-term in that 2026, we have to start with it. I'm not sure that we can shift that quickly to raise enough funds and build these reserves up enough to be able to alleviate that. But hopefully as we move forward in to year, maybe 3 or 4, that will be in a better position.
Yeah, that's a lot of important information that you just shared, and I appreciate you sharing your insights on that. Yeah, from what you've said, it's fairly clear to me that we're not taxing enough, we're not setting enough aside to look after our assets. If we're borrowing, if we need to build debt into our capital plan in order to plan for maintenance, that concerns me. I know both the city of Courtenay and the town of Comox have done quite a bit of work around their infrastructure levy in the last couple of years, recognizing that, it's not a financially sustainable way of running a service, is not putting enough aside to look after the assets that you have. And it concerns me that we have some major debt, like to fund increases to what we are currently maintaining, while we're making a choice to not fund the assets that we currently have to the degree that is financially sustainable. So, I put this aside at the last discussion, or the last year's budget cycle. It's never a good time to start looking after your future financial health when you feel like the current situation is really challenging. But I don't see that going away in the next 4 years. And I do think we need to get realistic about what the cost of maintaining these huge and expensive facilities are. And it's difficult without really understanding how much because it's hard to tell from the information that we have how much debt we do need to take on for maintenance versus our new capital, like the arena addition. And, the aquatic center is not too far away. We'll be doing some planning around that, and there'll be debt associated with that. So I don't know what the answer is, but I do think we need a financial plan that at least shows increases to our contributions to reserve, because as it currently stands, it is, we're not showing a needed increase in the requisition. I don't think it's a clear picture of what the demands of providing the service is going to be going forward. So just wanted to share those thoughts, because I have concerns that we're pushing this on to future commissions when we should be addressing it in a shorter timeline than that. Yeah, so I don't know if staff have any other comments on that.
If you've just, sorry, from the debt perspective, the new debt coming on from Arena 3 is shown separately from what we need or what we've planned for from a life cycling perspective. So if you want us to move back to that slide, that can give you that perspective. And my only other comment with this service is from an overall funding model for this service, we will circle back into user fees as well. That is, we have a meeting coming up where we're going to be talking about that together, and that comprehensive user fee review will just bring that ability to this table to relook at. So where do you see individual use, and where maybe potentially should those fees be higher in order to more cover 100% of the cost of the benefit that the individual is getting, as opposed to what everybody pays for.
Yeah, that sounds like important work. So just to clarify on this slide, in the annual capital projects, it's clear that those larger figures are the arena expansion. I'm not sure what's in 2027. And is it the numbers on slide 10 or on the annual equipment that is, or maybe this isn't the debt slide. Is this the right one?
Slide 21. What I was thinking.
Let's go here.
One more.
There you go.
Okay. Right, okay. Yeah, thanks for highlighting that. Yeah, I guess my other question is, I mean, because Jennifer alluded to this too, that we don't know when there could be major equipment failures. And if we were to experience some significant piece of equipment go down in the short term, say next year, would we just add that to short-term debt, or what would be the outcome if we encountered a problem like that?
Just through the chair, this one, it would depend on the magnitude, and in our future expenditure reserve, we don't have very much wiggle room in there as well. That's not going to cover a whole lot. Maybe we'd be coming back, potentially having to move off some other projects, try to shuffle things so that we can address the need of something that's more of an emergency.
Okay, thanks. I'll move back to Director Brown.
Yeah, so just hearing those concerns and if I understand the implications of them correctly, we can increase the requisition now and build reserves in a gradual way, or we can have something break and have to spend a whole bunch of money and pay in a big way, or incur a whole bunch of interest charges on debt. So that's just how I'm trying to think about it. I think it's more reasonable, obviously, to do a gradual increase and get some reserves in, because we know we need to do these investments. So happy to have that conversation in this a very difficult context. But I'm also curious, I know the asset management plan is coming, and is that maybe an opportunity? Like, is that happening this coming year? I don't quite remember what the timing is. And could that be an opportunity for us to understand what we need to do in a better way in terms of reserves?
You through the chair, I'll give you a bit of an update on asset management. What we have an asset management steering committee together, which, just as a reminder, that's representation across our whole organization. We recognize that we need to get in place some of our foundational pieces before we get too far ahead of ourselves, and that looks like just ensuring that we have our standards in place of, okay, so what pieces of data that we need to all be collecting and things like that, because we don't want everybody to be going all on their own ways. We've absolutely been taking this agile approach to what we need to do. Our departments know that asset management plans are necessary, and you likely recall that in some of our areas in water, sewer, solid waste management. We have quite a bit of work that's done in recreation and understanding our assets and getting that inventoried and getting condition assessments. Some of our units have full asset management plans already done. Recreation does it. So I guess what I'm saying is, from a departmental level, individual departmental level, we are trying to progress and do what we need to do. We understand that it's a high priority for this area to get to a place where we have our asset management plan finished. And we'll keep ranking all these pieces as we keep going and developing our roadmap. We do want to, with this recreation service, to be able to get to that place where we have the information that we need from an asset perspective to be able to create more of that financial plan going forward and how we're going to get someplace better with this. And to directly answer your question, the progression that's happening with our corporate asset management, yes, that team will absolutely be able to support our departments more fully in dealing with these high risk areas. It won't be too long before we have a draft strategy pulled together, standardization of what our asset management plans are going to look like and everything that they should include, so that we can do all of this important work.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. And so picking up on that, will there be a point when that plan comes back to the commission where we can understand how in alignment or how close we're getting with our future capital costs versus what we've been putting away? Is at some point some insight into how far off we are from really what we should be? We had a similar workshop in the city of Courtenay for our infrastructure deficit, as we call it, which I think it's fair to say we probably have one in this service. And just from a decision-making point of view, understanding what would be required in order to kind of rebalance that.
It's just for clarity, is your question twofold? Overall corporately for CVRD and plus for this particular service? Is that what you're asking?
I'm more asking just for this service, but I do understand that applies to other areas as well.
I think it's been typical that when you've had these major bodies of work done from an asset perspective, that they've come back to this recreation commission, and I would see it no different. Having the asset management plan complete would be a big milestone and great and information that the board needs. So I certainly can see us coming back with that and providing that information to the board, and whether it's in conjunction or shortly after that or how it works out, similar to how we've walked through our water rate reviews, where we do that work in bringing that in to determine what does the funding need to look like, what do all the rates need to look like, or can they look like, in order to be able to raise enough money to operate.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that. And Director Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And just to build on that, in terms of a number, I believe that Mr. DeMarzo in his presentation at the beginning this afternoon spoke about a $14 million amount for the corporate energy plan for assets. And I think that included both net new assets for new facilities, but also for replacement costs. So is it fair to say that that's, you know, if we're aiming to move towards that, it's 14 million plus all the other assets that will be established through the asset management planning.
I'm just through the chair, maybe, I don't know, do you guys want to answer in detail to that? Because all rolled into a recent study. Go ahead, it'll be better to answer.
Through the chair to the director. So the 14 million had to do with life cycle replacement costs. But as we replace those components of those facilities that are meeting their end of life, we're replacing them instead of with like components, replacing them with components that run off electricity and reduce our carbon emissions. So that is the increased cost there. So those are not building new facilities. Those are maintaining our existing facilities while we meet our carbon reduction strategy goals.
Yeah, that's helpful. And I guess, Chair, just going off of your thinking, I mean, I would be supportive of asking staff to come back with an option for the commission to consider a phased approach to increasing reserves for capital expenses. So I'm not sure if that's maybe sounds like, Chair, you've done a lot of research into this, and I trust that our CFO has articulated that we are on thin ice for a lot of our reserves. And I guess I am a little concerned that our response to a question around what would happen if we had a major system failure for one of our assets, that we may very well have to dip into debt for that. I don't think that I'm super comfortable with that. And so would be curious to see if others had any thoughts around asking staff to come back with some options for us to consider.
I'm so sorry. It's my wonderings about that, and you know, two things. If that's something, just clarity around, do you want us to come back and with those options to incorporate within this plan, within this 2025 plan, or throughout 2025, that as we get these pieces of work completed from an asset management perspective, I'd have to come back and we'd have to discuss when we can have an asset management plan pulled together. Do analysis, come back, look at reserves, as I was saying, the minimums and the maximums, and then bring that financial plan back to this commission during the year and ready to be implementing into 2026. Because it's that also think of the economic uncertainty that's out there right now, the difficulty with this budget. We have this great awareness of what we need to be adjusting in this service to make it more sustainable, and really appreciate the board's support in that. We won't lose sight of that. But totally up to the board as well. If you want this 5-year plan to be more reflective of that, we certainly can come back in with what we know to be putting in those increases across the 5 years, aligning it more to a place where it's more realistic of what we need.
Yeah, thanks for that. I'll just let our CAO chime in for a moment.
Yeah, Lucy kind of laid out two options there. One is to come back before the adoption of this year's budget with layering in some additional reserve contributions, or throughout the 2025 calendar year, coming back with some more detail around that asset management planning work, and then looking to future financial plans, 2026 requisition to really start applying more attention to those reserve contributions. And certainly up to the commission's direction on this one. My recommendation would be that we look to that work throughout the calendar year in 2025, so we can come back to you in 2026 with a plan that responds to your interests and I think our needs around those reserve contributions. I'm not sure how much additional information we'd be able to really pull together before this budget needs to be adopted and rolled into the overall CVRD budget, and you'd certainly have more information to be able to make those decisions later in this calendar year.
Yeah, thanks for providing that additional context. Yeah, I think it's really important that we get a clear handle on our medium and long-term planning around this service. I don't see a huge amount of difference in the outcome, whether or not we address that this year or next year. But my experience has been, since I've been in local government, that, you know, we kind of move from one challenge to the next and pushing off. I mean, I did raise the concern around the lack of reserve contributions last year. If we lose another year of not increasing it, I don't think that'll change things drastically. And I appreciate that staff have a lot of work on their plates at this time of year in terms of making adjustments to the budget. And if we're speaking to reserves, it's really about long-term financial planning. So I think that, but I do think it is important, even for communicating with the public, that we have increases built into a service as important as this one that represents such a large piece of the taxation around recreation, that we need to show that, you know, the cost of providing those services do have an increase over time, and that we are looking after the assets that we have by putting away the money that we need to in order to look after them. Director Hillian.
Thanks, Chair. I appreciate this discussion. I think it's been really useful. I tend to be in favor of when an issue has been flagged to this extent, giving staff the time to really do the necessary work and dig into it. So I would be in favor of them doing that over the course of the next year into the 2026 budget, which is, I think, essentially is what's just been said. You know, I think that this is the most significant discussion on this topic that I recall taking place at this table. So I think the fact that it's been flagged to this extent for staff now, and it probably wouldn't hurt to have a resolution that reflected that once we move forward from this, just asking staff to do the ongoing work to bring back in the course of this next year a policy related to reserves that addresses the concerns that have been raised.
Thanks for that suggestion. And Director Kerr.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to make an observation, which I think characterizes how uncertain these times are and how we're not sure as commissioners or as directors how exactly we want to handle this time of uncertainty. For examples, we at a prior meeting last week, we talked about affordable housing, potential housing corporation, and maybe scaling back on the tax requisition in that example to like kind of the smallest option. In the same meeting, we talked about search and rescue and an increasing tax requisition to maybe get a facility for them sooner. About an hour ago, the parks talked about scaling back tax requisition to maybe have less reserve, less land acquisition in the short term. And now in rec, we're talking about increasing the tax to increase reserves. So I'm not making a comment on any of those being good or bad, but just 4 different examples, each with a separate thing happening and different reasons and different math on the screen. But I think as commissioners and board members, we should decide, are we taxing more and more reserves? Are we cutting back and going bare bones, or something in the middle? It probably doesn't make sense for each committee and commission to have a different plan. We should have an organizational focus based on our strategic plan and execute it across all of our endeavors. Thanks.
Yeah, I think you're really highlighting one of the gaps that we are currently trying to address around our financial policies, and that we don't have a reserve or surplus policy in place that we can point to. So, and I know that Lucy has spoken about that in a previous board meeting, so I won't ask her to go back to that. But yeah, it is a challenge when we're taking a different approach at each discussion. So thanks for pointing that out. Director Grieve.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Yeah, in a normal year, this would be a very helpful discussion. But like I said at yesterday's Electoral Area Services Committee, directors make plans and God laughs. So I think because of the fact that we're living in such uncertain times, this will look much different in a couple of months. We'll know way more what we're going to have to do. Obviously, we have to submit our budget at that time. We're going to be stuck with our tax requisition as it is. Worst comes to worst, we cut back at that point and put the rest in reserves for the 2026 budget. Because if tariffs are going to bite, they're going to bite a lot harder in the second year.
Okay, with that, I think the discussion is wrapped up. I don't see any other lights on. So we'll move to the recommendation on the report. Moved by Hillian, seconded by Grant. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that's carried. And I don't know if there's another motion.
Yeah, thanks, Chair.
Director.
Yeah, I guess I'm tabling a motion, Councillor Hillian's thinking around asking staff to come back over the 2025 year with options to consider a reserve policy for the Recreation Commission.
So we'll just give staff a moment to get that up. Okay, it's coming up on the screen here. Was there a seconder to that? Yeah. Director Hillian. Okay, Director Morin.
Thanks, Chair. I guess I'm just wondering, as Director Kerr highlighted, and we've had other conversations around this at every committee and the board level. I'm just wondering if we need to, is the idea that we're going to come back with a reserve policy just for the rec commission, and then each committee or commission is going to come up with something different? I guess I'm just wondering if we need a more holistic policy that highlights each area, but is, I'm just wondering if if this creates a piecemeal kind of approach, and whether I absolutely support this, but I'm just wondering if we need something that's, more holistic. Thanks. And I don't know if staff has a comment on that.
Just through the chair, I'll just give you my initial my thoughts around it. As I've talked about as a given update on our fiscal framework and strategy work that we have as one of the board strategies, that we want to finish conducting our research over that. At the moment, the way that I think that we would be approaching it is to be coming back to the CVRD board and saying, this is what we feel that your framework should look like, with including all of these types of policies. And here's our draft strategy that goes along with this framework, so that we get to where we need to be. So as part of that, absolutely, I do feel that we would have an overarching CVRD reserve policy, debt policy. And then in the nature of our regional district here, there may be places where, for example, solid waste management may be a really good example, where they may want their own individual reserve policy. So they either adopt the CVRD policy, which is many times our process. They've adopted our investment policy, for example. But in those cases where it makes more sense for that service to have something that's maybe more specified to their needs, then I certainly can see that particular board working on and morphing it into their own reserve policy. And I would very much hope that it maintains all of these best practice financial things included in each one of these policies, but they may have ones that are very tailored to their needs as well. So this is the way I'm foreseeing it at this point. And same with this committee. We do have this on our work plan to hopefully by the time summer rolls around, that we have this draft framework pulled together. And then we can have that overall policy considered and come back to this board around this work that you're asking for, and you can make a decision of whether the overall policy works for this board or whether you want your own specified to recreation services.
Thanks, Lucy. That's really helpful. And it looks like that maybe answered your question. Okay. Seeing no other lights on, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? And Director Hardy opposed.
I just think Lucy's thoughts there are probably a little bit more appropriate for us to go down.
Okay, and moving on to our last item. Service 660, Comox Valley Exhibition Grounds. I'll pass this to staff.
Thanks. And Jennifer Zaminden again, introducing the Exhibition Grounds Service budget.
Thank you. Through the chair, we will just jump right in. So we have no proposed changes to the 660 service. Jumping into 2024 accomplishments, we had the site tour and review of the Comox Valley Exhibition Grounds conceptual site plan and implementation strategy with the ALC committee. We replaced some footing of all our outdoor riding rings, installation of some pasture shelters and Stonehenge cladding and sprinkler upgrade, and the purchase of an electric UTV. And those are all, again, risk management and safety and some seat with the electric UTV. Trends and challenges, of course, our trends increased use of the exhibition grounds and its programs. We're seeing a different kind of usage now. We're getting a lot more smaller groups wanting to rent versus the big groups like the Music Fest. We're getting lots of smaller 2-day and 3-day events, which is fantastic. Supply chain issues, trying to get what we need to be able to fill and fencing and those kinds of things, a little bit of an issue. Some challenges, increasingly complex requirements to obtain our agricultural land reserve non-farm use designation, and of course, the increasing cost of capital projects. And under opportunities, future upgrades of facilities may increase opportunities for use, revenue, and partnerships. Under our strategic priorities and initiatives, of course, we have our asset management, our conceptual site design plan and implementation strategy, and our facility maintenance. So things like facility inventory condition assessments of all the assets on the grounds and the final report to come forth in 2025. Planning and design work for the upgrade of the market field in 2025. And that's really dependent on getting the final report and stamp of approval from the ALC. The agricultural land reserve non-farm use license and city court requirements for traffic planning, capacity modeling, and flood hazard risk assessments to implement the plan objectives in the future. So there's some work being done there that we have to work together with the city of Courtenay on. And replacement of footings in the therapeutic riding barn, and to increase the safety and the market field through some renovations. The market field can get lumpy and bumpy in time. Under the human resources, so we did some position allocation changes. So you will have noticed in the 645 rec budget, there were some adjustments to the allocations because there was a few positions that had some percentages shifted to the exhibition grounds. So as an example, our admin coordinator, they were at 90% for 645 and 10% for 660. They're now at 70% 645 and 30% at 660 because we are getting a lot busier with programs and with rentals and those kinds of things. So they do need to provide us some focus at the exhibition grounds. Under the expenses, we have a couple of additions. So an additional contractor support in the summer months. Of course, we have a lot of time, a lot of busyness through the summer. So we need that additional support to make sure all the facilities are ready as our renters come in and go out and as our user groups come in and go out. We have a one-time cost for the agriculture plan for the market field. And there was a question about water, and I'm going to call it the prime liquid water. In the summertime, we do need water to keep dust down. We need water for fire support. Those grounds get incredibly dry through the summer, and especially when we have those heat domes. So we do need to be prepared and have the ability to utilize water a little bit more, again, for safety for the use of the grounds, to keep the fire hazards down, and also to keep the dust down so people can use the grounds. And of course, things like watering the horses and all the use on the grounds for the various animals that may come on ground. They need the water to drink. The market field work is still dependent on the ALC final report in support of the exhibition grounds work. The ALC panel came and did their site visit mid last fall in November, and the final step they're waiting for is receiving the final report from the ALC. We did reach out to the ALC before Christmas, and they got back to us after Christmas, and they said, hang tight, we'll get a report to you here at some point mid-spring or early summer. So we're holding out hope for being able to get the farmers market field some work done in there. That's a long time project we've been wanting to move forwards for the farmers market. Under our revenues, so where we may see some decreases in the future, as an example, with Music Fest not coming on the grounds this coming year, where we see the increases are more rentals of our buildings, more barn rentals, more the upstairs office above the washrooms, or it's not an office, but there's a space up there that has more ability to be rented. We have space above our bike shop, more ability for rentals. And we're getting a lot more horse boarders coming on site as well. So we have an opportunity for some outbuilding rentals, coming in the future, and different ways of land rentals. Instead of a 10-day chunk with Music Fest, we'll get some 3-day chunks here and 3-day chunks there, and so on. Under our funding sources, there's a requisition increase from 2024 to 2025 of 60,000, and then holding steady. And again, that's just to make sure that we can get the work done that we need to get done on the grounds in time. Under the operating budget, again, some minor increments in the revenue and in the operating cost. So we want to make sure, again, that we can keep our day-to-day work and projects completed. Under exhibition grounds, the capital planning, here's the asset management again. And again, project planning to start with the implementation of the CityWorks Asset Management Framework in 2025. And the asset inventory and condition assessment of the exhibition grounds will be completed with a final report in 2025. And that gives us a really good idea then of what we're looking at for the various buildings that are on site and what kind of work we may need to do with them. Under our capital 2025 to 2029 capital plan. So there's the market field, there's a security system. We do have some interesting comings and goings from midnight and on in some various areas. So we want to try to button down on that. There's a perimeter walkway that we would like to eventually get, put into place, and converting our gas vehicles to our gas truck into an EV truck. And so again, SEEP and managing our assets. Under our long-term capital plan, we have gates for security. So first we'll start with the cameras, then we'll work towards some security gates. And again, converting our zero-turn mower from gas to electric. Here we have a look at where our reserve balance is ending at 2024. Our future expenditures, where we're going to be over the next 5 years. Our capital works and machinery reserves over the next 5 years. And then our summary, and Doug covered it quite well, but the one thing that I did want to add into our summary here is that we've been working quite closely with Lush to make sure that their garden area is conditioned and ready to be able to handle the upcoming seasons with more piping and for the water system and a better fencing system and an expansion, a small expansion to the garden, which they've been quite excited about. The grounds did get somewhat flooded just before Christmas. So the work couldn't get completed in 2024. So it'll be completed here in the spring of 2025. So we're quite excited for Lush to have them on the grounds. They have some really neat programs that we're looking to partner with. Everything from coming to volunteer to pick the garlic and the leek, to learning about the garden and learning about gardening, to having the hand in hand, the little kindergarten kids coming on site. So we're quite excited to look to partner with them on that. And so then on that note, we come to the options and the recommendations that the proposed 2025 to 2029 financial plans for the service of 660 Exhibition Ground Service be approved. And on that note, staff are happy to answer questions.
Thanks for that final presentation. And Director Grieve.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Jennifer, for mentioning this is one of the mice compared to the elephant of the previous discussion. I think it's important to note that this ground is so very important to the agricultural community, and especially people in rural areas in general. I think I think with the advent of the new agricultural plan, there's possibilities of maybe developing some of this a little over and above what we envisioned a few years ago. But for now, I mean, this is great. We're going to level out the bumpy field there. And insofar as the farmers market, I mean, it's one of the main things that was agreed to on the ag plan was to somehow come up with a permanent home for the farmers market, whether or not it's something in the immediate plans. Obviously, you know, it's even in light of the current economic geopolitical issue that's before us. I mean, sourcing out food in the local area and the support of farming and agriculture in general is going to be so important. Also, I think that you know, it's totally a realistic budget. I've been, as you know, I've been pulling very hard for my entire 17 years in office for this site, and we do have a lot of improvements that we. I think we're probably pretty close to retiring the debt, aren't we? On the servicing we put in there. Do you know how close we are when we put in the kiosks and the water and the power kiosks? I think that was in 2011. I think 2012. So it must be pretty close to retiring that now. So there might be, you know, a little bit of reserves I see. I would say a little birdie told me that the agricultural land reserve is going to smile favorably on the regional district. So we'll wait for that official announcement. Otherwise, thank you very much for bringing this forward, and thank you very much as well for taking a meeting with the Comox Valley exhibition, because like I think most of the outdoor events this year last year didn't really make money. Some of them went in the red. Music Fest for one, and I think the exhibition as well. So, you know, it's really important to keep this space for exhibition. It is the exhibition ground. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for those comments. Director Brown.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to do a little celebrating about that market field work that's happening. It has been a really long time coming, and it will dramatically help when it finally does, when the ALC finally says go forth. But the timing, obviously, you can't do the work while the market's there. So even if they do approve it this spring, it won't happen this year. It'll have to wait. Or is there a plan to move the market somewhere else and then move it back?
Through the chair, the timing of the market field rehabilitation would be, it can start in the fall. So the farmers market, we were talking with Twyla, there may be 2 weeks where they may need to either just go onto the kin field, or we can possibly take it to the sports center, but we'll make sure that there is a home for them. And then that work will happen from September or October through to December, giving it January through the spring to settle and set. And it should be good to go for the spring. The other piece was that the farmers market, so Twyla, we have met in respects to them looking for a permanent home and potentially some kind of a, not a gazebo, but a structure of some sort. And we want to work together with the planning department, with the agricultural the future agriculture plan to see what the future can look like there. So those conversations have started as well. And we're just, I think we're waiting for that agriculture plan just to move the next notch forward. And then we'll circle back and meet again on that to see what the potential future could look like there. So the one thing is that we want to make sure we don't do this entire market field. And then there's the possibility of some kind of a structure. But we've kind of, I think, found some magic on what we think, could potentially work so that we could get the field done and look for a spot for some kind of,
Yeah.
something.
Okay, awesome. That's what I was gonna ask next. And so does that then have to go back to the ALC when that structure? Yeah,
Through the chair, there will have to be a conversation with the ALC. The location that we think is a potential for some kind of a structure, may be a good location. So where the current parking lot, the paved parking lot is, normally with the ALC, if you don't expand the site, like if they have pavement already in place, if you don't stretch beyond that, you will receive approval versus if you have to stretch beyond a footprint that's already there. That's where you can run into some difficulties. So we sent Twyla off with some homework to go see what's a potentially possibility and then to come back to the CVRD with a presentation, and we'll go from there.
excellent. Long time coming. Thank you so much for your work on that.
No, thanks for that question. And Director Moran. That's okay.
Thanks, Chair. I notice in the summary, Indigenous relations is blank, but I know that this department has been doing, like many of the departments, has been doing a lot of work around this, and we do have the reconciliation advisory table. But I guess I wanted to bring it up because of the location of, we're talking about ALR land, and balancing all the needs and things like that. But I think it's really important to recognize that there is some cultural significance to that area and, well, obviously to all of the lands here. So I just wondered if I know that the new Comox First Nation Chief and Council has a lot on their plate and there's treaty coming up and all these things. But I guess I'm just curious whether we have engagement and conversation with them around this particular site and just looking at some point, shorter term to medium term, having some acknowledgement, there's trails there and all that kind of stuff. And anyway, just curious about that. I just think it does somewhat border IR2 and yeah, I just wanted to bring that up and see if there's any of that going on.
I think in my discussions and dialogue with Comox staff, we are certainly looking for those opportunities for recognition and education and support for that cultural heritage. And you're right, this is a prime location where that might be something we can put more on the front burner. That said, we also know there's other priorities, and like you mentioned, treaty is coming up less than a month away, the treaty vote now. So being mindful about our priorities and their priorities and having those conversations. So not something that is lost on the conversations, and we look for those opportunities. But nothing specific in the hopper either.
Thanks.
Thanks for that question, Director Hillian.
Thanks, Chair. I'd really like to thank you guys for looking after this marvelous piece of property. It has so many wonderful functions. I know it's primarily an exhibition grounds and serves the agricultural community, but also it serves people like me who walk our dogs there, and there's tons of people who do that and who just walk. It's like a park. So, and with your permission, Chair, I'd like to move the recommendation.
Yeah, please do.
I just did.
Yeah, moved by Hillian, seconded by Brown. Yeah, I think so. I think it was. I don't see any lights on, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that's carried unanimously. And that brings us to the end. I'll assume that's unanimous.